Blacksad was based on before you drew it?
No. Well, New York, yes, because I've been many times, and New Orleans, but not the others. For Amarillo, I had to rely on documentation and old pictures because it was so complicated. Well, then again, some of the places. I mean, I made a heck of a road trip, when was it? No, but it was after Amarillo. But I made a road trip from San Francisco to Yosemite, then to Las Vegas, and then the Grand Canyon, well, before Bryce Canyon, Monument Valley, and Grand Canyon, and then down to San Diego Comic-Con. So it was a great trip, and all these landscapes and cities, all this visual information, it stayed with me. I have a huge amount of photos taken by that time. So yeah, I try at least as much as I can to be well done.
Now, when you're working at Blacksad, do you get to weigh in about where you want a story to take place? I don't know how you work with the writer.
Yeah, the writer decided.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, when he proposed a story in New Orleans, I said, no, please, no, come on. I know New York already so well. I've been working on studying so many books of old pictures, and now it's easy for me. I feel comfortable there. Don't get me out of my comfy zone, please. You want to? No, but I want to do a story with a jazz musician. Okay, go to Harlem. That's how we go to Harlem. And you don't need to make me seek for more and more documentation now, more references. They say, no, New Orleans, okay. And I couldn't be happier to have made that trip to New Orleans and to be able to enjoy that wonderful city.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun to be able to do that. Some of you heard before, but I write a time traveling wine comic, and part of it was because I wanted to write my trips off to wineries for a year. Because I'm not stupid, and that was a lot of fun. I actually got to visit the oldest winery in the United States, which became the basis for what the book is, and a lot of that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone on that trip. Greg, what do you do for reference?
I got zillions of books, and these days I go press a button on Google.
It's an internet.
And I refused to use a computer for years. I mean, my Jean, was my manager, my wife, everything. I always would go to her, Gee, I need this, because I got all the books, but I need a Chevy 57 Impala from the back with the sun from the top, and I need the rear end. So, there it is, And she finally said, I'm sick of this, I'm going to get you a laptop. And see, she taught me, and they came back into my studio area, and we're assembling this thing, and I was like freaking going nuts because I don't want this technical shit on, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I finally figured it out, and now it's like, holy crap, I can go find anything I want and just print it out. So that's what I do. Because I totally get what I was talking about, the reality of the space and places, like you pick up all the energy and vibes of it. But I don't have the time to do that.
Right.
You have to be able to use the information you have and the knowledge that you have and put yourself into that space. Well, Howard Pyle, always taught, the students that you have to become part of the scene that you're illustrating. So I've always made that effort to get inside the scene, to put myself there. And that's all part of it. But no, mainly now it's my books and the internet.
How about you, Bucky?
I do a fair amount of research. If I can find locations to explore that will get me into the right kind of environmental sort of framework for stuff, that helps. I also search for stuff online as well. I also have a fairly large collection of books, although I find that these days actually trying to locate where the book is as much as a problem as anything else, because I don't know about the rest of you, but my home is a library, and it's getting to the point where I wish it was actually organized like a library and not just randomly assembled on chance. And occasionally trips will help. I mean, I spent some time in Bruges, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is Fables. This is great. And similarly, I did a signing tour in Germany for a week, and one of the little towns we visited was a walled city that was just absolutely packed full of buildings from 4 centuries ago. That again, it was like, oh my goodness, I can actually see how they constructed some of these buildings and the way they were using the wood plugs to kind of assemble certain sections and how parts would fit together. And it was like, oh, this is fantastic. So I was taking pictures and making notes and doodles so that I could then incorporate all of that back into the work. And I also sculpt. So I mean, I quite often make little models of character heads and that sort of thing, where if it's anything a little bit strange, goblins and monsters and stuff like that, that tends to be quite handy, because then you've immediately got a 3-dimensional reference that you can just hold up and stick under the angle poised lamp and say, oh, okay, that's how it's going to look in that environment. So yeah, that kind of stuff helps immensely.
Any other questions? Because I have more, but anyone? Yes.
What is the, you're the artist, but what is the collaborative process like for Blacksad? I mean, is the writer writing everything and giving you a script, or are you collaborating on how the story is going to be told visually?
Yes, we collaborate a lot. I mean, he writes everything. Actually, he doesn't like when I suggest a phrase. He always finds another phrase to replace the one I suggested. And fortunately, because he's a better writer than I am, and he finds a more subtle angle to say things and to not repeat the things that you see in the panels and the things that you see in the page and the dialogue or the text. And he writes, in the beginning, he writes like a plot of the whole thing with the characters. The main character goes for 3 to 5 or 6 pages, the whole story, but not the dialogues, not the situations, and maybe some of the main sequences, but not everything is final. It's just this shows to me and to his wife, so we can come together and sometimes I just don't like the story, or I don't like some characters. Say this character really I don't feel good. So we exchange, we talk a lot about it, and if there are some big decisions to implement to the story, he goes with me. For him, the main thing is that I am inspired by the story and that I feel happy drawing it. And then he writes the dialogues, and then we go back to each step. We comment after it's done. I read it, I take notes, and then we get together. Usually in person. I go. He comes to Paris, or I go to Madrid, and we talk. We talk about it thoroughly and try to find solutions. Sometimes for the second volume for Arctic Nation, the story changes like 5 times. And I mean, the main characters and the main situation was the same. Blacksad going to the suburbs under the snow and with this racist, white supremacist group, and there was a kid, there was a kidnapping, but all the other elements changed a lot. And at some point, we felt like we had to get together and go down on it and I don't know, get isolated from the world, and we did. He came to Paris, and for a whole weekend we would spend it in my house, in my studio, just trying to solve this case. It was like solving it backwards, like Sherlock and Sherlock and Watson, like Holmes and Watson, trying to find what happened actually. So backwards, we need a good plot and a mystery, and who is the bad guy and what's the interest. So try to build the story together so it was coherent. And at the end we did, and we were locked up with the coffee and biscuits and having coffee all the time, and it was a great weekend.
Yeah.
I was curious, obviously I love the anthropomorphic, part of the story. Is there like any particular rhyme or reason to how you choose which animals portray which characters, polar bear?
And do you choose that? Does Juan Díaz choose that? Or are you both?
Actually, Juan Díaz does. The writer does. In the first version of the story, of the plot, already the characters are named, and the animal, it's right behind. It hyphens. It's written, so carrot, polar bear, and the other one, hawk, which is a white fox, and the other, everyone is selected. 80% of the time I agree with the characters, and some other times I say, I like this other animal, maybe it's more photogenic, it's more interesting as a character, or for this particular role, maybe we can use this other character, this other animal. So we discuss all that, and the reasons to choose to cast this or this animal are many. Sometimes it's just the physical aspect. Sometimes it's the cultural notion that we have of those animals, cultural notions that come from back, really way back, like from the Bible, from mythology, and from the fables, actually. Because Juan says often that Blacksad was born as a narrative experiment of mixing, trying to mix a very old literary genre like the fable, which is as old as almost as writing, and a very modern one, which is the noir story of detective stories, which is proper to the 20th century.
Yes.
Earlier you mentioned how you had been in animation for about 30 years before you started drawing comics.
13.
13?
13.
So how hard was it to go from cartoons and animation to drawing a comic book? How hard was it?
It's all drawing. It's all drawing. I've been drawing my whole life. I went to fine art school and they couldn't get the drawing passion out of me because they tried to.
It's a common experience.
They will always try to. And by the time of my teenage years and 20s, I was passionate about comics, and then I found a job in animation, and it's all drawing. Then again, it's two different trades. It's totally the craftsmanship in animation is different than in comics. The language is different, the way you're gonna need to draw is different, and the approach on the movement and of the dynamics, character dynamics, is the opposite. Actually, many people say, I've been told that oh, you can see that you are an animator. Those in your comics, those are animation poses. And, oh, sir, you don't know anything about animation. I'm sorry, but no, it's the opposite. In animation, you have to you break down the movement into many drawings, and none of them has any appeal. Most of the time, those drawings don't have any appeal. They are not balanced. They are not beautiful, pretty. But in comics, you have to condense all this moving in one drawing, actually. So you put everything on that drawing, and that drawing has to be appealing, unless in animation.
Yes.
I was curious, will there be any future Blacksad volumes, or
Sorry?
will there be any more Blacksad?
Yes. So we're working already on the next one. We are making a story in 2 volumes, which will be longer, with many surprises and many cool things. And will happen in New York, because after all the trip to New York, New Orleans, and going back through Denver and Chicago and everything, it's back in New York, and people were asking for a more classical noir detective story, so that's what we wanted to do.
Because you can do Baltimore now.
I'll go through writer.
So this guy who's hosting my panel said, you had a question too.
Yeah, no, any thought of going to either animation, like since we were talking about animation, having Blacksad be animated, or rotoscope, or any plans to go to the big screen?
Yeah, actually, there was an option on Blacksad for many, many years by Thom Zahler, which is a producer of, maybe you remember The Artist, the movie that got the Oscar like 6 or 7 years ago. That producer, who is a big crazy guy, he held Blacksad rights for 15 years or more, yeah. And eventually he dropped it. He let the rights go and decided not to do it, but he had already spent a lot of money on it. And then now the rights are on Studio Canal company. We don't know if they're going to do something, but there has always been a Blacksad movie project, but it never goes real. I've spoke to many French directors that working in Hollywood, like Pierre Morel, who directed Taken, and then Alexandre Raja, who directed Piranha 3D, and especially Louis Leterrier, who directed Clash of the Titans, and Hulk, the second Hulk, and Now You See Me. And he was enthusiastic, and the guy is fantastic, but somehow for a while he was holding on the project, saying, yes, I'm going to do it. At some point, these guys are asked to do something else, and they just jump into another project, and they forget about everything. There are no promises made and no contract signed. They are just interested in a project and hope that they will keep wanting to do it, but you can't control that. It's totally different world.
All right, so we got about 10 minutes left, so I want to give you all an opportunity. What are you working on next? What do you have coming down the pipeline? Let's start with Greg.
I'm working on a graphic novel with my son. He's been writing for a long time. We worked on a couple of stories together already. One was a short thing that was in the Frank Frazetta Fantasy Illustrated I did with my twin brother, he was live. But now we're doing a graphic novel. IDW is interested in looking at it. IDW is, I went out in April with a book and all my brothers and mine, all my Marvel stuff with Tim. And a pinup book, my pinup art. I've been doing retro pinups for the last 20 years. And I've got a lot of Marvel covers that I'm working on right now. But the big thing for me is this graphic novel with my son. That's like I'm very enthusiastic about that. And I hope I got 20 private commissions I got to finish. And, it's like that. And there's a pile of stuff. I don't, see, Jean keeps, my wife and business manager, she's got a chart that everything is listed on that I have to work on, So she marks them all off. She lets me know each morning what I'm working on. And I really like that because it's very controlled, and so I don't even know what the hell I'm going to be doing when I leave here on Monday, but I've got something I'm looking at, So it's all.
Sounds like perfect, right?
Yeah, it is. It's like,
the missus is taking care of everything. We have bird hats.
No, no, absolutely. When we met like 40 years ago, she said, "You paint and draw, and I'll do everything else." And she literally does everything else. That's what I do. I paint and draw. And so I should be better than I am.
How about you?
Well, I have this that new book, the Peru one, the literary one. It should be called in English something like a rogue tale or a rogue tale in the West Indies, something like that. It just released in France. It's gonna release in Italy, in Spain, and in Germany very soon. And I'm trying to fix a deal to have it in English as soon as possible. And the project immediately after is now the two next Blacksad volumes, and then we'll see.
Yeah, I still pottering away, trying to get the new volumes of Miracle Man done with Neil Gaiman. He's been spending a lot more time in London just lately, which is handy because we're endeavouring to co-write the new stories. So every so often we meet up and I voice memo our chats and go away, feverishly turn them into plots and script, and busy penciling away, trying to get as much of it done as I can. In between looking after my 3.5-year-old daughter who has completely upset my ability to be productive. I'm spending a lot of time being a dad. But that,
It'll turn around once you teach her how to flat a page.
yeah. But she's Alexandra's absolutely lovely. And what else am I doing? I just had a book out with a British comedian, Sir Lenny Henry, who has produced the first of his memoirs about his life. And he had this idea that he'd like it not to just be a regular kind of prose biography, but for you to, when he hit certain key moments in his life, it would suddenly switch to comic book form. So I've been working with him on that, and that was a huge amount of fun. So we've got a couple more of those to come. And I've also been doing a lot of sort of non-comic stuff with album cover artwork for various bands in the UK and a couple in the States. So that's been a lot of fun as well. My friend Chris Opperman, who's in the audience, I got his album up next on my drawing board. Yeah, so that's it. But mostly trying to get Miracle Man done, and then once that's finished, I've got a couple of graphic novels of my own that I've been quietly beavering away on and other stuff. So.
That's awesome. Well, I'm hoping for Greg's wife to tell me what to do next. That would be great. Actually, I just came back to, I did a book called Love and Capes for years. It's a superhero sitcom. I just came back to that. The first 2 issues are out. And I'll be writing more issues of My Little Pony. I just sent in a bunch of pitches, and I have the current Sherlock Holmes one that has a ton of Sherlock Holmes references in it. It's all, there's a Sherlock Holmes story, The Mystery of Silverblaze, which is about a kidnapped racehorse. And my girlfriend took me to a Sherlock Holmes event. It was the featured story, and I'm sitting there going, this is a Sherlock Holmes story about a horse. I write about horses. I can make that work. So yeah, I pitched it there, and that's how it happened.
I have a quick question for you, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
I'm just curious, seeing as this is the yearbook panel.
Yes.
So what's the process in terms of how you select what will be the subject for the following year's book?
So, it's an amorphous process, and mostly it's Mark Nathan, because Mark has to approve on it, because he's the one who's ultimately paying for the book. Sometimes it's based on who's got an anniversary year, it's based on who we can get to come. Sometimes, I'm trying, like the Tellus one we knew ahead of time. Like that one was set way ahead. There have been times where one just fell into our lap. And actually this year it was Steve Conley that when you were announced as a guest, and when that was set up, Steve said, he should be the yearbook. And Mark's like, you're right, he should. So that just worked out. Yeah, and there's always relationships, and like there are white whales we have that we would like to do, but sometimes the creator's not ready to let someone else do it, or there are legal reasons why you can't do it, or it's tied up one way or another. But I think we've been really lucky, and one of the things let's see do I want to say this? Because the way the yearbook actually came about is I was at a bar with Mark Nathan, and he asked me if we could do a book like that, and suddenly I turned into Scotty from Star Trek 4, or actually the guy making transparent aluminum, who said, oh yeah, we do that stuff in stock, because I'm a graphic designer, and I'm like, oh yeah, I work with printers, we can do that, and then the next thing I know, I'm burning on deadline, trying to get the book done for him. As trying to wrangle artists is the hardest part, but fortunately I am an artist, so I know most of my own tricks. So when somebody says, oh, I'm almost done with it, I'm like, okay, send me the pencil sketch so I know if I'm going to put it on a left page or a right page. You're like, oh. Like, you didn't do it yet, did you? Yeah, I know how this part goes. So there are processes in place to try to make that go as smoothly as possible. So yeah, there are a few that we would like to do that we're hoping that the right things fall into place. We always have a list going, and sometimes it's of the moment too. But that was it. We've had a couple of yearbooks in the past where they're very popular titles, but they're not, like, they don't resonate with artists the same way. Like, they don't know how to draw it, or they like the book, but they don't know what to do with it. But when we got Blacksad, it was, even if Blacksad doesn't have the penetration in the comics market that it should yet, all the artists in Artist Alley knew what it was, and everybody upped their game to be part of it. And I like being able to share the art, because there's a way for some of the artists to see other pieces that have been done, and then you see something like Greg's piece come in, and I looked at that and said, oh, I have to be much, much better than I thought I did. So everybody like competes against each other, and it's better and better that way. So last thing, where are you on the floor, and where can people find you, like, on the internet?
I can tell you on the floor.
Oh, yes,
Okay, tell us on the floor.
Mark,
I'm on 207.
you are 207.
I am 1120.
And Juanjo is, oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I can't find him now. You're at the essential sequential, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. That is 2407.
Yeah, that's right by the media stars.
And then Greg is at, 2405.
2405. And are any of you guys on the Twitter or the Facebook or Instagram, anything like that?
Facebook, spiderwebart.com.
You can find me as Bucky Comics on Instagram and Facebook, and I've yet to bother with Twitter because it seems like a frightening place.
Full of flow. Don't do it.
I can't be angry all the time.
I only have an artist page in Facebook. I don't use really Instagram. I have an account, but I'm not active on it. But it's Juanjo Guarnido in Facebook. You have my private account, and then the artist account. And I upload almost everything I do.
Excellent. And I am Thom Zahler, Thom with an H, on Instagram and Twitter, and sometimes actually post. So let's have a big hand for our artists today.
I think I might interrupt you. And the thing is, I should. I wasn't sure. I was thinking. I said, grab the earbuds. Sorry. One.